You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us again this week on NightVision Radio. I've got a great show coming up, and just do a few housekeeping items up front, as we usually do. Hope that you'll come and visit me on Facebook. I post, information about upcoming guests and current guests and past guests on my Facebook page, and also on the Night Vision Radio Facebook page. If you don't mind, go over there and click like on that page. That can help us out a lot. And also, any of you who are interested or may be interested in getting information about France, about Southwest France, and heading over there with me to hang out with Henry Lincoln, author of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, or co-author, I should say, and The Holy Place in Key to the Sacred Pattern, and many others over there. Mr. Tim Wallace Murphy, who's also a best-selling author in that genre of material. So just let me know, send me a Facebook message or friend me on Facebook, and I'll be happy to talk with you about it. We're trying to, keep the number reasonable so that we can, all have a good visit and be able to spend quality time with the speakers that are going to be joining us over there. So let me know. Anyhow, tonight, boy, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to the summer of 1969. I know some of you probably weren't even around then. Well, I was, I guess I'm giving away my age again. I seem to do that every single week. But I was a teenager in 1969. I wasn't living in Los Angeles at that time. I was still in my home state of Oklahoma, living in Tulsa. And I remember hearing the news about this crazy murder that had taken place, or crazy murders, I should say. I'm talking about what's commonly known now as the Manson murders. And my guest tonight is a historian. He's a great journalist and an author, and he's done beaucoup research into Charles Manson and the Manson family, and he's sort of come at it from a little bit of a different angle than some of the stuff you might have heard otherwise. He's written a book about that. He's also written about Manson's sort of occult and black magic connections, which is going to take us right in to the next segment in the next half hour, where we're going to be looking at Adam's new research and his new book on Discordianism, and the Historia Discordia is his latest book, and he's going to explain all about what that is and how that actually kind of ties into the Manson thing. So welcome, Adam. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, René.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I want to thank Tal for putting us together. He's a good buddy and a great source always. So thank you,
yes.
Tal. We appreciate it. Anyhow, somebody just put René is 29 on the chat room. That's so kind. I'll pay you later, Mark. Don't worry about it. I owe you big time. Anyhow, Adam, so how was it that you got lured into the Manson family story? Because were you even born at that time?
Oh yeah. I was born in 1960.
Oh, wow.
So
What did you, when you heard about it at the time, you were obviously 9 years old. Do you remember hearing about it? And were you in California?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, I live in Central California. Yeah, I remember hearing a bit about it. It really came to my attention in around, it was like 74 or 75. There was a mini series, I don't know if you recall that, called Helter Skelter, based on the Bugliosi book, and it kind of blew my mind. At that time, I was kind of becoming interested in the 60s counterculture, you know. I was a little young for that, but my brothers were of that age, and I started rediscovering. They had left a bunch of their albums when they moved, you know, the Beatles and Doors and on and on. So I was interested in that period, and when I saw that miniseries on the Manson family, it kind of blew my mind, like, wow. That was
of course, at the time, that was a long time ago, and that was before, I later got into making films and television, but I was just, an observer back then in the early mid-70s, and I remember thinking it was a great miniseries, though, and the guy that played the part,
Steve Railsback.
There you go, Steve Railsback. Did such an amazing job. I mean, he was Charlie Manson by the end of that thing. He would totally, and I remember the most shocking moment, or the scariest moment for me in the whole, or the most dramatic moment in the whole miniseries, was when he was staring at Vincent Bugliosi, and he stopped his watch somehow. I don't remember exactly how the story went.
Yeah, just like Uri Geller.
Yeah, exactly. And
that was great. Steve Railsback knocked it out of the park with his
Charlie Manson was this little guy. He was like 5'2", and you think, how could someone be so charismatic to bring in all these young people? And of course, I know sort of how cults work, and you don't necessarily have to be a weak person to get drawn in. You have to be caught at the right moment or the right time in your life. But maybe he had a little something more going than what we realized, and maybe that was sort of a clue to that when he stopped that watch. Is that possible?
If that really happened, I mean, there's so much mythology surrounding the Manson murders and Charles Manson himself. Sometimes it's difficult separating, the wheat from the chaff. But as far as his control over his flock, I think that can be attributed to, he grew up in prison. Most of his early years were in reformatories or prisons, so it was kind of the school of hard knocks, and that's, that was his school. That's where he learned to become a manipulator and such, and was also, he mentioned Scientology. In the early 60s, he was exposed to Scientology when he was serving time at McNeil Island up in Washington State, and according to the stories, he was part of there were several folks in a cell that studied under a guy named Lanier Rainier, who was a Scientology auditor, could teach Scientology. And so that's where Manson was first exposed to Scientology and, different ways of quote-unquote mind control and, what's become known as NLP these days. So he was exposed to that type of stuff pretty early, and some of his mentors in jail were some heavy hitters like Alvin Creepy Karpus, who was Public Enemy #1, actually taught Manson to play guitar and such, and mafiosos like Frankie Carbo. Manson got to know, and learn from these guys. And so by the time he got out of, the last time he got out of prison, before the murders, was in 67, and he was in his early 30s at that point, and landed, in the San Francisco in the Haight-Ashbury, and the young hippie kids and chicks were like primed to be fleeced by him, and he moved right into that scene, grew his hair long, was somewhat, half-assed musician, so he was able to, at first attract a couple of girls, and then it kind of grew over a period of time, as did his control over them.
Well, absolutely. Now, so you think he might have been employing some of these methods that he learned from the Scientology auditors, as well as from the criminals and the cons that he ran into there? And
I think so. Do you remember the conspiracy researcher and writer Jim Keith?
I absolutely do. I had a chance to speak with Jim a few times when I was working on a TV series called Strange Universe.
Ah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, we talked with Jim. That wasn't too long before he died. Because didn't he die in the 90s?
Mm-hmm. Around, was at that Burning Man. He was at Burning Man and was around 99. You mentioned, when we were talking earlier, getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, but we'll circle back to what we were talking about. I had written an article, it was actually a review of Jim Keith's Saucers of the Illuminati for UFO magazine back in, this was the late 90s when he died.
Oh, wow.
So there's a connection there, but interestingly enough, Jim Keith was a former high-level Scientologist. A lot of people don't know that.
I did not know that.
And he shared with me a few things. He saw different films and stuff of Manson, and he said Manson was employing certain techniques that came from Scientology, like doing mirroring techniques of people when you're talking to somebody. If you start mirroring their actions very subtly, you can build a rapport with them. And that's a method that's also in neuro-linguistic programming. So when I talked to Jim, this was years ago, he pointed out a few things of in Manson's speech and mannerism that told him that he was employing different Scientology techniques.
Wow. Now, I don't remember exactly the mode of Jim's death, but I do know that there was something suspicious about it. And then wasn't it a few years later that one of his co-authors or co-editors then died? Was that Jerry Smith or? Well,
we can go down that path because it's tied into Discordianism, oddly enough. We can get back to Manson, but since you brought it up, I gotta. So Jim died. I'm thinking it was 98 or 99, and he was at the Burning Man festival. Out in the Nevada desert. That everybody knows about Burning Man. I've been to a couple over the years. And so he was there, and he was up on a stage doing some performance thing, dancing, whatever, and he jumped off the stage, and it was like, he was just getting off the stage. It was like a 3-foot drop or whatever, but he tweaked his knee and screwed it up, and, it got bad enough the next day he went in for medical attention to the Washoe County hospital there, and They put him under, and he was really nervous about going under anesthetic for this routine surgery. During the course of surgery on his knee, a blood clot was released, went to his lungs or wherever and killed him. And he had told somebody, before the surgery started, that he was reluctant to go under anesthesia because he was concerned something like that might happen. So, so a lot of people...
well, did he feel like somebody was out to get him, or do you feel like he might have... a lot of people do seem to kind of have a premonition sometimes about their own demise.
From what I know about Jim, he wasn't overly paranoid about that. Even being a conspiracy writer, there was kind of the humorous Irishman side to him, but he was getting into some heavy stuff. But other people wrote about it at the time, like Ken Thomas. Ken, he was a good friend of
Ken's going to be on next week.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
So you can ask him about this, but they wrote The Octopus together about Danny
Casolaro.
Danny Casolaro, that whole deal. And at the time of right before Jim died, he was looking into the death of Princess Diana, and it uncovered some pretty controversial material suggesting that she was pregnant, with Jody Fayad. Was that her boyfriend with her?
Dodie.
Dodie, yeah. With his child, and he had other material. He was getting ready to expose this. So some people point to that. Who knows? But so that was, if I can get all the dates right here. So a year or two later, this all happened, within a couple of years. Jim Keith's publisher was Ron Bonds at Illuminate Press. I knew him pretty good too. Illuminate Press was pretty much the foremost publisher of conspiracy books, along with a couple other publishers like Feral House.
Yeah.
And another curious death. He died of food poisoning in a Mexican restaurant, and a lot of people raised their eyebrows because Jim Keith and Ron Bonds, at right at the time of Jim's death, were pretty working closely together. Jim Keith had become like a partner at Illuminate Press, so over the course of the couple of years, the main players there were gone, and no longer publishing conspiracy books. Now, there was one other person involved with the Illuminate Press who died around the same period. It's a guy I've written quite a bit about by the name of Kerry Thornley, who maybe we'll get
and he's involved in
Discordianism.
Yeah.
But he was just briefly, his connection with Illuminate Press was Illuminate Press brought out a bunch of Kerry Thornley's books. He hadn't really been books that hadn't been published before, dealing with the Kennedy assassination, Oswald, this type of stuff. And in fact, the first book published by Illuminate Press was Thornley's book, The Idle Warriors, and he published a total of 3 titles. So Kerry Thornley and Jim Keith were the most published authors at Illuminate Press, and Thornley died in 98. I think Keith died in 99, then Bonds died in 2000, so I might not have the dates exactly right. So in the course of 3 years, the main 3 players at the Illuminate Press were all gone, and
I remember sometime later I started doing this show. I've been doing it now for about 7 or 8 years. I was at a different venue before, but I was going to have Jerry Smith come on.
Oh, yeah.
And I contacted him, but he was too ill. Mm-hmm. And so he never did make it on. But, I think he might have had some questions about his illness. I don't know. But there seemed to be a lot of people, dying around Jim Keith and that whole situation.
Yeah, as far as Jerry Smith, he died more recently.
He died sometime later, yeah.
Yeah, like a couple of years ago.
Oh, has it been that recent? Yeah.
Yeah, probably not more than...
I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago at least.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah, so that was sometime later. I guess that might not be connected, but...
people do. We all die.
We all, and we all look for conspiracies too, or at least I do, I guess. But I always.
And if you look hard enough,
you will find them.
Yeah.
But now, back to the Manson thing. Did he perform you talked about black magic. Was he actually performing black magic rituals and things like that you were able to find out? And was that how he sort of controlled people with magic, or was it just simply through the mind control?
Well, yeah, and using acid. There was some amount of ritual going on, especially with a lot of, they'd have group orgies and that type of stuff, which, is basically sex magic, who's trying to alter the consciousness of the group and make them into one being, was kind of the trip in the latter days of the Manson family. So, it definitely relates to ritual magic, sex magic. So, like I said, there's a lot of mythology about this stuff too. Tons of books, and sorting through that, sometimes it's hard to tell what has been made up and what is not. But if you look at the roots of the Manson family, it's pretty interesting. Even prior to Manson getting out of prison in '67, another guy. You familiar with Bobby Beausoleil?
Sure.
Yep, he was. So the first actual Manson murder was committed by Bobby Beausoleil of Gary Hinman. That was like in August of.
And wasn't Bobby Beausoleil later murdered?
No.
No.
Mr. Beausoleil's still alive, but.
Really? And he's in prison?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I see.
Well,
I'd kind of forgotten about him.
Let me give
but Gary Hinman was the one that was murdered in the desert, right? Or left out in the desert?
No, Hinman was murdered in Topanga Canyon at his home.
And what was his connection?
Well, he was a drug dealer, bathtub chemist, and he was making, I think it was different drugs, but mescaline, and so Beausoleil was a middleman, and there was a biker group that Beausoleil sold some of Hinman's stuff to, and the biker group said they got sick and they wanted their money back, so it kind of put Bobby Beausoleil in the middle of Hinman and this biker group, and things eventually just kind of swirled out of control when because the bikers wanted their money back and Hinman wouldn't come across with it, so that led to the first murder. But getting back to the occult stuff, Beausoleil, it was and is a very talented musician. He was in LA in the mid 60s, actually played with a early version of Arthur Lee's Love, if you remember that group. And,
sounds familiar.
Yeah, great 60s group. Then he moved, Beausoleil broke up with, or left Love, Arthur Lee's Love, and moved to San Francisco, or they kicked him out of the band, whatever the case may be. But he ended up in San Francisco around 1966, formed his own band, and came to the attention of the experimental filmmaker Kenneth Anger, who had a long history in the occult. He was a protege, disciple of Aleister Crowley, and you may be familiar with some of Anger's films. They delve into a lot of these darker areas. And so during this period, Anger saw Beausoleil playing at a concert somewhere and approached him and asked if he wanted to be in a film he was trying to get going called Lucifer Rising, and he wanted Beausoleil to play the lead part of Lucifer. And so Beausoleil started this relationship with Kenneth Anger, and
what was Kenneth Anger into philosophy-wise with the Lucifer Rising?
Well, he was into Crowley, thelemic magic,
oh, sure.
And that type of stuff. As far,
yeah.
So that's where he was coming from, and they started filming this movie, but they had a falling out of some stuff, and you hear different sides of the story. Anger says that Beausoleil ran off with some of the film footage and all this, and according to legend, Anger placed a curse on Beausoleil, which, who knows, might have led to the Manson family.
Oh, wow.
But some of the film footage later came out in a film you can find, it might even be on YouTube, called Invocation of My Demon Brother, with Beausoleil in it, as well as none other than Anton LaVey of the
First Church of Satan.
And Anger and LaVey had a long relationship too. Prior to Church of Satan, they were in a group called the Magic Circle. So you had that connection with Bobby Beausoleil. Then ultimately, Anger, used the footage from the original Lucifer Rising for this movie, Invocation for My Demon Brother. But then later on, Anger did a new production of Lucifer Rising that was different from, the Beausoleil footage. And Lucifer Rising film was being developed in the 70s, and Anger became friends with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin.
Who was into Aleister Crowley, of course.
Yeah, and at that time, Page was living in Crowley's Castle, they call it, in Boleskine, near Loch Ness, and Anger went out there and was kind of working on his film there and having Jimmy Page do the soundtrack at that time. Anyway, once again, Anger has a falling out with Page, and so they never used Jimmy Page's soundtrack, but you were asking what Beausoleil is doing in recent times. Anger approached Beausoleil, this was in the 70s, to produce the soundtrack for the new Lucifer Rising film, which Beausoleil ended up producing in Tracy Prison in California, and it's a pretty badass soundtrack.
Really?
Yeah, so he's continued doing music over the years and has released several albums. You can find them online, and has kind of rehabilitated his image. He works with youth groups, and however that works when you're in prison. And I think if any of the former Mansonites has a chance
of getting out, I was going to say that, because he had nothing to do with the Tate LaBianca murders.
No, he was forget, he's either locked up or on the run at that time. He might had some knowledge of it, but just because he's been so active the last couple decades and doing work that is positive and working with youth, maybe he has a chance. But
I remember there was an old Richard Pryor comedy album, and he somehow mentioned the Manson murders in it, and he says, they won't get out. He said, as long as they're making coffee, they'll never get out. Mm-hmm. Because of course, Abigail Folger was one of the victims.
Yeah.
But I remember when the murder happened, it was like a year after Rosemary's Baby came out. So everybody kind of knew who Roman Polanski was here in the United States at that time. And the movie was so dark. I remember thinking, it has something to do with Rosemary's Baby or Roman Polanski, or, and the fact that there was another guy there in the room with Sharon, Jay Sebring, who was her good friend, I guess. I thought, he's angry because this other guy's there. But then, of course, soon we found out that it was the Mansons. But that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's another one of the legends that is not true regarding Rosemary's Baby. That for years people have been floating this rumor. I don't know how it got started, but maybe Anton LaVey started it himself. But the story was that Anton LaVey had worked on Rosemary's Baby and had actually played Satan in the movie and had been a technical advisor and all this, And that at some point during the movie, him and Polanski had a falling out, and afterwards LaVey put a curse on Polanski, which led to the Manson family murders. But that story's not true. If you look on the internet, you'll see different iterations of the story that LaVey was involved with Rosemary's Baby, where of course we know was filmed at the Dakota Building, where John Lennon was later shot dead.
That's right. Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about that.
We're on the thing about some of the occult connections, and Anton LaVey in 65 or 66, once again before Manson got out and the family got started, future Manson family murderess Susan Atkins was in San Francisco working as a topless dancer, where she ended up working for none other than Anton LaVey.
Oh, wow.
LaVey at that time had what was called the Witches' Sabbath. It was like a topless witches, review of topless dancers, whatever. And Susan Atkins, for that topless review, played the part of a vampire, where she would have blood dripping from her teeth after every performance.
Oh, that's kind of ironic, isn't it? You know what? It's the top of the hour. It's 8 o'clock, and we're going to take a quick break, or it's actually 8 o'clock Pacific time, I should say, 11 o'clock Eastern. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go a little bit further with Adam Gorightly and into his research for his new book, Historia Discordia. Hang in there with us.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Hello IRN listeners, this is MJ saying hello and sharing an awesome secret I discovered. It's called DreamNuage.com. Fresh, raw, organic ingredients are used to create all their products. They are made in very small batches to ensure quality and freshness. Handmade in the USA, each product is created with care and with the finest organic ingredients. There are no preservatives, dyes, or chemicals in any product. Stop by Dream Nuage and relax. That's DreamNuage.com. Simple, raw, organic.
Locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Hi, thanks for hanging in there with us. If you're just joining us, I'm René Barnett, your host. This is Night Vision Radio, and we are talking to author, journalist, and historian Adam Gorightly, and we've been talking about the Manson gang, the Manson family, Charlie Manson and his occult connections, and we're going to go right into Adam's new book called Historia Discordia, which is, believe it or not, there is a relationship there. But can you tell us, first of all, because I wasn't familiar with this at all, this idea of Discordianism, what is it and where did it come from?
Started in Southern California in Whittier back in the late 50s.
Where else would it start?
At a bowling alley that's still there.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, I kind of, quote-unquote, rediscovered that bowling alley a few years ago, and we did a kind of spoof ritual there for Discordianism. But how it started, these two kids, Greg Hill and Carrie Thornley, they grew up in Whittier, attended Cal High there, and they used to spend a lot of time in bowling alleys. In the Bible of Discordianism, Principia Discordia, they say they spent time in bowling alleys sipping coffee and talking about philosophy and politics and these type of things. But I think one of the main reasons they frequented bowling alleys was because they could get beer there and stay up to odd hours and just talking and riffing on different subjects. And these guys are a couple of free thinkers for their for that age. The Eisenhower 50s. They were throwing all kinds of things around, and at one point they started this discussion questioning, why was there so much chaos in the world? And all these different religions have these different deities who were trying to impose order, but it never seemed to work, and jokingly Carrie Thornley said to Greg Hill, what we need is our own religion dedicated to chaos, our own deity. And Greg Hill said, well, there already is one in Greek mythology. That's Eris, the Greek goddess of chaos and discord. So right then, back there in 1958, they started what initially was a spoof religion called Discordianism and formed the Discordian Society. So that's where it started, was just an in-joke at that time, way back in the 1950s between these guys. And so the next step in the story, we leave Discordianism for a little bit. Carrie Thornley, he was a Marine Corps reservist in high school there, and so to fulfill his active duty, he enlisted in the Marines. This was like in late 57, 58, and I think he had a sense that the Vietnam War was on the horizon too, so he wanted to get his military service out of the way. So he was stationed at, and this was in, this was in 59. No, late 58 at El Toro Marine Base near Santa Ana. And it was there that he met none other than Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, it gets much crazier. Oswald had previously been stationed at Atsugi Air Base in Japan. And apparently, the cover story, at least, was he got into a lot of trouble, so he came back to the States with the rank of corporal, which was kind of odd, because anybody who'd been over had at least the, came over still with the rank of private, which was odd because anybody who came back usually was a corporal. So he had this shroud hanging over him as like a screw up. And that's the period that he and Thornley met. In over a couple month period, they became casual friends. And Thornley was a guy who liked to engage in conversations, and so he engaged in many conversations with Oswald about politics and philosophy and religion and on and on. And so they got to know each other briefly over that short period of a couple months. Then Thornley was shipped over to Atsugi, where Oswald had previously been stationed, and on his trip over on the boat over to Atsugi, he started working on a novel titled The Idle Warriors, about being in the military during the Cold War period. And the main character in the book was named Johnny Shelburne, who was kind of a composite character based on Thornley himself, different Marines he had known, including Oswald. So Thornley gets over to Atsugi, and it was during that time frame that he heard that Oswald defected to Russia. And he thought, holy crap, that's a hell of a story there. And at that point he decided to base his book Idle Warriors primarily now on Lee Harvey Oswald. So that's kind of the first oddity in this story, that Thornley was writing a book about Oswald 3 years before the Kennedy assassination.
Now, when he went to and defected to Russia, you said Thornley was like, holy cow. Well, what had he revealed anything to Thornley prior to that would let him know something about his politics that would make Thornley say, oh my gosh, he actually did it? Or,
well, yeah.
Or was it just opposite of what he had said?
No, when Oswald got to El Toro, where Thornley knew him, he was learning to speak Russian, so he'd lay some Russian on, different conversations, jokingly a lot of the time, and he also subscribed openly to Pravda, and so he was interested in Marxist ideology, and so that's kind of the thing that he and Thornley had conversations about, politics and different political ideologies and whatnot. But really looking deeply into this over the years, and I've written a couple of books. One was The Prankster and the Conspiracy, the bio of Kerry Thornley in 2003. Then most recently a book that goes more into depth called Caught in the Crossfire, Kerry Thornley, Lee Oswald, and the Garrison Investigation. What I think Oswald was up to was, there's evidence that seems to suggest pretty clearly that he was recruited to be an intelligence asset, a spy, when he was over in Atsugi, Japan, and when he came back over, this cover story that he was a screw up and that he was was interested in Marxist ideology, and all this was basically a cover. I think his role there at Atsugi, or at El Toro, where he met Thornley, was basically to infiltrate the troops there and find out if anybody was security risks. And Kerry Thornley, I'm sure he raised some flags. This was an off-the-wall, crazy character who would, once again, just love to have discussions on all sort of different topics, and was an avowed atheist and all of this. So I think Oswald's role back then was probably just being a spy for the brass. And then, not long after, he defected to Russia, which a lot of people suspect he was on a spy mission when he was over there.
Now, when you started looking into this idea for your new book, this Gordianism, how was it? What brought you in? What was the doorway that you went into that subject matter? How did you get drawn into it?
We still haven't really discussed Discordianism in depth. It really
well, that's true too. I did notice one thing, and I was reading about it today, and I noticed one thing that sounded really interesting, and I totally agreed with it, and had thought of it many times myself about how our reality is only our reality because that's how we've been programmed. We see reality as we've been taught, as we've been programmed. And if we were programmed in a different way, if we even grew up in a different location or even in a different ethnic group, we would think differently. Our reality would be something different. And to me, that's been sort of at the heart of the problems in society, is that we don't have the ability to see the other person's point of view. We don't have the ability to step out of ourselves and put ourselves empathetically in their position and say that, okay, I understand why this is why he thinks this way, and now I have to understand why I think the way that I do. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's very basic, and that's a good thing. Now, when I started reading further and people were assigning themselves these bizarre names and things like that, I thought, okay, what's this all about? And the more it started sounding like some kind of bizarre, secret society thing. So can you enlighten us a little bit more on the philosophy? Yeah.
How'd I get started on this, and I'll get into the philosophy, was that I was initially interested in Kerry Thornley because I'd heard about him in the conspiracy world back in the day, and it's kind of a crazy character who seemed to be involved in all kinds of stuff. Not only he knew Oswald and was somehow connected to the Garrison investigation, but he was also founded Discordianism, this quote-unquote spoof religion. And so that research led to the first book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. So, Thornley got out of the Marines in 60 or so and ended up in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and that's where he got, that's where kind of some of the Discordian activities ramped up. His friend Greg Hill, the guy who co-founded Discordianism with him, moved with Thornley to New Orleans. This is in early '61, and so they started working on this spoof philosophy or religion, which basically is kind of just, it has a lot of different purposes, one, it's, a way to poke fun at organized religion, for sure. That was one of the reasons they got into Discordianism. And also, just to comment on the culture of the period. And so they adopted their own Discordian names, such as Greg Hill, the founder and the architect of the Bible of Discordian, Principia Discordia. He was Malaclips the Younger, and Kerry Thornley was Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, and they met other people in New Orleans during that period, a guy named Roger Levin, who adopted the name Fang the Unwashed. And so they started developing this quote-unquote spoof religion, and published in around '65 the first edition of Principia Discordia, or How the West Was Lost, it was titled. And the legend was that there was only 5 copies published, most of which were lost. In the years to follow, Principia Discordia changed in subsequent editions, kind of morphed over time. So by 1969, it had become more of an art project shared between a bunch of people who corresponded in the mail and sent things back and forth. So if you look at the first edition, which is reproduced in my book, Historia Discordia, it kind of lays out the structure of the religion and all this on and on, all this technical stuff. the later editions of Principia Discordia looked more like a psychedelic collage with a bunch of aphorisms and psychedelic statements, and so it changed over a period of time. And that's the edition most folks are familiar with these days, is the 4th edition of the Principia Discordia. And along the way, different writers and artists got involved, such as Robert Anton Wilson, who you may be familiar with.
Sure.
He was known as Mordecai the Foul in the Discordian Society. And so the Principia Discordia and Robert Anton Wilson's relationship with like Carrie Thornley and Greg Hill influenced the Illuminatus trilogy, which became pretty huge in the counterculture in the late 70s, and throughout the Illuminatus trilogy, which if you're not familiar with it, it's this crazy sci-fi conspiracy book that perceptions and reality is constantly shifting in point of view in the book, and it talks about the grand conspiracy with the Bavarian Illuminati, on and on. A lot of this stuff came, the material for Illuminatus came out of his interactions with Greg Hill and Carrie Thornley in the late 60s. And in fact, the first book in the Illuminatus trilogy is dedicated to Carrie Thornley and Greg Hill.
Oh, no.
Now, you asked about the Illuminati.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that ties in.
Now, wasn't it Robert Anton Wilson that declared himself the head of the Illuminati or something like that?
No, he declared himself the toe of the Illuminati.
Oh.
It's a little joke there, but that's when he shared with me, because I asked him, I interviewed him for my book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, years ago, and I asked, Bob, is it true that you're really the head of the Illuminati? And he said, no, I'm the toe. Which wasn't quite the answer I was looking for, but I asked him, well, anyway, since you're hooked up with the Illuminati, can you appoint me a high priest in the Bavarian Illuminati? And he did so. So there you go. I'm also with the Illuminati. No, there was rumors. Because of Illuminatus, the trilogy, it gets pretty deep into the Bavarian Illuminati, and Wilson and his co-author Robert Shea had a lot of knowledge about the Illuminati, and so people began suspecting, as people are wont to do in the world of conspiracy theory, that Wilson is a part of the Illuminati, because Wilson had studied alternative religions and got involved in all kinds of esoteric sects and orders, and just basically to research about all these different secret societies and such. So the rumors started, that he was perhaps the head of the Illuminati, and of course he'd never deny it. What was
Of course not.
But how a lot of this interest in the Illuminati goes back to the Garrison investigation, believe it or not, which, the Oliver Stone movie JFK was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we talked a little about Carrie Thornley and Oswald, and in 1967, Garrison started his investigation, and during the course of that investigation, he targeted different individuals, and one of them was Carrie Thornley, claiming that Carrie Thornley, also the co-founder of Discordianism, was part of the JFK assassination conspiracy, that he was perhaps performed the role as one of the notorious Oswald doubles, that he had written his book Oswald, that came out in '65, as a way to set up Oswald to portray him as, a lone nut commie simp. Thornley had testified before the Warren Commission, where he talked about his knowledge of Oswald and these type of things. So Garrison theorized that Thornley was in on the conspiracy, and that he lived in New Orleans during that relevant period where David Ferry and Guy Bannister and all those guys were involved there. So that's kind of our story keeps getting more weird. Of course, Thornley denied all of this, and I get more into all of this in my latest, one of my latest book, Caught in the Crossfire. But anyway, during the course of all this, Garrison had a lot of different independent investigators showing up there, feeding him different information. One of them was a guy named Alan Chapman, who part of his theory was that the Bavarian Illuminati was somehow involved in the JFK assassination. This type of thinking was kind of prevalent during that period with the John Birch Society, that somehow, like Sirhan Sirhan, for instance, had been corrupted by Madame Blavatsky and Theosophy, and that traced back to the Illuminati. So these theories were bouncing around, and when Kerry Thornley heard this, that the Bavarian Illuminati, this guy Alan Chapman thought the Bavarian Illuminati was in on the JFK assassination, Thornley thought that was hilarious. So to kind of screw around with Garrison and his investigators, Thornley, in cahoots with Robert Anton Wilson and a few others, they came up with their kind of a phony stationery for the Bavarian Illuminati, and Thornley used his name of Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst and sent Garrison letters and John Birch Society letters and other people letters saying, yes, we are with the Bavarian Illuminati, but we're not involved with the assassinations, we've come here to illuminate you. And started sending out these fake letters, And so that's kind of how part of the mythos with the Illuminati helped spread during that period. At the same time, Robert Anton Wilson was working as an editor at Playboy for the Playboy Forum. Both he and Bob Shea, the guy, his co-writing partner of the Illuminatus trilogy, were working at Playboy. And Wilson was editing the Playboy Forum, and that was a forum that dealt with civil liberty issues and these type of things. And it was kind of a question and answer format. He'd answer different questions. And he also got letters that didn't make it into the Playboy Forum because they were so far out and about conspiracies and these type of things that he collected these. A lot of that material was used for the Illuminatus trilogy. But in April '69, in the Playboy Forum, a letter was in there, or a question. Somebody was writing in asking if all the this person writing the letter, who was actually Wilson pretending to be this person writing the letter, was asking about all the political assassinations, and that some old strange man had told him that the Illuminati were behind all the political assassinations, and Wilson answered the letter. And that appeared in Playboy at that time, and it seemed to help push forward this mythos of the Bavarian Illuminati. And Wilson later wrote that he felt they kind of pushed a magic button, and all of a sudden you started hearing more stories about the Illuminati from both sides of the political spectrum, from the religious right to the liberal left. All of a sudden it seemed to enter the conversation or the popular consciousness. People started bringing up the specter of the Illuminati, which they fleshed out even more in the Illuminatus trilogy. Of course, nowadays the Illuminati is everywhere, so in one way or another, Wilson and Shea had a big hand in pushing forward this mythology about the Illuminati, which is not to say that they don't exist or haven't done bad things, whoever they may be over the years. But so that's kind of the background on how the Discordians got involved with the Bavarian Illuminati.
Oh, that's wild. That's really wild. I mean, there's seems to be such a trickster and prankster element to the whole thing.
Well, part of it, the Discordian philosophy was to shake people out of their certain paradigms, thinking in rigid thinking, and to kind of blow those away. And part of that is adopting these different personalities and sending out these wacky letters, for instance, to the John Birch Society and folks of that nature. One, they were humorous letters, but also to perhaps change people's views on these subjects, or
maybe shake things up a bit.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about it after this next break. Hope you'll hang in there with us. We're talking to Adam Gorightly. We're talking about Discordianism and occult and the Illuminati and all that really, really good dark stuff. So hang in there with us, and we'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Hello, IRN listeners. This is MJ saying hello and sharing an awesome secret I discovered. It's called DreamNuage.com. Fresh, raw, organic ingredients are used to create all their products. They are made in very small batches to ensure quality and freshness. Handmade in the USA, each product is created with care and with the finest organic ingredients. There are no preservatives, dyes, or chemicals in any product. Stop by Dream Nuage and relax. That's DreamNuage.com. Simple, raw, organic.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're listening to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett. Our guest tonight is Adam Gorightly. He's a historian, a journalist, and an author. We've been talking about secret societies and the occult in his latest book, called Historia Discordia, about Discordianism, a strange philosophy or religion that sprang up in the 50s. Now, you talked about it being like a hoax or fake religion. Was there a point where they got serious about it?
Well, because of all the craziness that entered Kerry Thornley's life, with the Garrison investigation and what happened afterwards, Thornley felt at least that he had, by starting this, what he thought was a spoof religion dedicated to the goddess of confusion, Eris, that eventually, all this chaos and craziness that came into his life, he might have unwittingly opened himself up to by all of this worship of Eris. And so
that was another thing that was interesting, that it ended up being a goddess-based religion and philosophy, which seems like that always pops up when you're talking about secret societies and the Illuminati and in groups like the Knights Templar and others. It seems like that was sort of the big secret. And even with some of the founding fathers of our country, that secretly there was some interest in the feminine or the feminine god.
Right.
But it sounds like they almost got into the feminine idea as an accident when, you said they just brought up the idea of, let's create a church based on chaos. And, and the one guy said, well, there's already a deity, Eris, the goddess of chaos. And so it seemed like it was almost accidental, but maybe some things seem accidental, but that's just part of the way things occur, possibly.
Yeah, that's the way this crazy universe works sometimes.
It seems to. But so they got all involved, or Thornley got all involved in this Kennedy assassination investigation with Jim Garrison and all that. So things kind of, did they kind of sit there for a while? Did the ideas grow? Were people joining in? How was it happening? And did people know about this at the time?
Let me give you a little background. And one of your folks in chat asked about MK Ultra program.
That's right. Wanted to know if you might have been used by or involved somehow in MK Ultra.
I hope they're referring to Kerry Thornley. And
well, I think they were referring to you, but there is an MK Ultra connection here, right? But it's not you; it's Kerry Thornley.
Right. And so we talked about he had moved to New Orleans in the early '60s, and that's kind of pivotal to the story because Thornley had he was a budding writer, so he had this interest in meeting the colorful characters there in New Orleans and developing material for books. And so, you had this, there was the bohemian element there, but you also had the underworld element and people that worked in intelligence agencies, perhaps. And so he met a couple of curious characters who went by the name of Gary Kirsten and Slim Brooks, and he engaged them in conversations, much like he had talked to Oswald about all kinds of things under the sun. And at one point, they had a theoretical discussion about how to kill a president, and in particular,
oh my God,
JFK. And Thornley at the time thought this was just a basically, a morbid, theoretical, intellectual exercise. But later, these conversations would come back to haunt him. So we move forward in time. We're getting to the MK Ultra stuff here. Thornley had served with Oswald at Atsugi Air Base. I talked about that before. And it was revealed, like in the mid-'80s, there was an expose in Rolling Stone that Atsugi was really the main installation for the CIA overseas, one of the main critical installations. And during the MK Ultra period, that's where they stored all the LSD. and they were testing on the troops, there
Yeah.
during that period. The other main storehouse for LSD was at Manila in the Philippines, where Kerry Thornley also served. So keep that off to the side here for a minute. So in the early 70s, Thornley was in New York with his buddy Greg Hill once again, where he was at a concert there at in some park somewhere, and he came across a magazine called the Yipster Times, which the Yippies put out. And in this magazine, there was an article about the 3 tramps, that they picked up in Daley Plaza.
Sure.
Heard about those guys.
Yep.
And the author of this article, A.J. Weberman, proposed the theory that one of those tramps was E. Howard Hunt, the famous CIA agent. Many
Right.
have connected to the JFK assassination, and Weberman later came out with a book called Coup d'etat in America, which had these acetate photo overlays that you could take of E. Howard Hunt, put it over the old man tramp in Daley Plaza, and it matched up exactly. Anyway, when Thornley saw this material, he went, "Oh, crap. That's the same guy I had those conversations with in New Orleans in the early 60s about killing JFK." And he thought, and he began to suspect that he was being set up at that time, perhaps in the same way that Oswald might have been set up. And after he was exposed to this material, like a floodgate of memories started opening up to him, and he had all these memories of things he had either had amnesia or been mind controlled or something about his things that had gone in New Orleans related to the JFK assassination. And he began to suspect during this period that he'd been a victim of MK Ultra mind control, perhaps that had been initiated when he was at Sugi. Others have made the same claim for Oswald. There was some curious stories about Oswald related to MK Ultra and LSD, and so he suspected that he and Oswald might have been used as both as patsies. Oswald was used as a patsy in the JFK assassination, presumably, and Thornley suspected he was going to be used as a fallback patsy if the Oswald setup hadn't gone the way it did. And
What made him feel that he had been used by MK Ultra? Did he feel like he'd been dosed with acid? Did he? What were the signs that he felt like?
Well,
or was it just because of the way things were coming down, he just suspected that?
Well, all these coincidences started coming up where he had these memories. He remembered meeting Clay Shaw and Guy Bannister and all these guys, and it was like, and then the years to follow, he became really a paranoid schizophrenic by the mid-70s and felt everybody was in on the conspiracy, including even he suspected at one point Robert Anton Wilson was his CIA handler. So what caused this? Was he actually the victim of an MK Ultra operation that drove him bonkers, or what came first, the chicken or the egg? But what is
right
interesting is that E. Howard Hunt, once again, turns out that he was stationed in Atsugi during the same period Oswald and Thornley were there.
Oh, wow.
Thornley became your classic clinical paranoid schizophrenic, but he also, had all the different elements. When people are talking about MK Ultra mind control victims, Thornley was experiencing all that same stuff, voices in his head. He was convinced at one time that there was some kind of implant transmitter that had been inserted in his inserted into his brain somehow, or some. So all of this stuff was going on, and everywhere he went, during a certain period, he felt he was being followed, and all related to his knowledge regarding the JFK assassination. But it's funny, in later years, Thornley got on medication, kind of pulled his life together. So at its worst, there's only a couple of years where he was really deep into that funk of being a paranoid schizophrenic. He came out of that in later years, when we talked about he worked with Ron Bonham at Illuminate Press, and his books were published. And I interviewed a lot of people who knew Thornley in his later years. He lived in Little Five Points, Atlanta, kind of a bohemian hippie area there. Mm-hmm. And invariably, a lot of people shared the same stories. They'd be out, say, at a party at a restaurant with Thornley, and Kerry Thornley would leave after a while, and other people would show up asking questions about Kerry Thornley, willing to buy people drinks, and inevitably the conversation would get into the JFK assassination. This happened more than once to several people I know, and so there was always that specter of Men in Black kind of following Kerry Thornley around throughout his whole life.
Now, Kerry Thornley, is he still with us?
No, he died. He was one of the big three that died in the late 90s, along with Jim Keith and Ron Ponce. Thornley was part of that bunch at Illuminate Press. Thornley died in 98, around Thanksgiving. And he claimed it was a rare kidney disease that he died of. And he suspected up until the end that it was all related to the conspiracy, that he'd been somehow poisoned or something.
Well, I mean, normally people do not recover from paranoid schizophrenia. So if he was genuinely schizophrenic on his own, then he wouldn't have gotten better. But if it was somehow induced, then it's more credible that he would be able to somehow come out of it at some later time. So it sort of lends itself to the fact that there was some sort of intervention or interference there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perhaps. One thing about Thornley, he was a real unique individual, as you might have gathered. And one of his friends told me that was the interesting thing about Thornley. He was the only paranoid that she knew, and this is my friend Louise Lacey told me, who was friends with Thornley. She said he was the only paranoid schizophrenic she ever knew that was able to retain his sense of humor, even during that period where he went into his deep schizophrenic funk. And, medication can help do wonders as well, so...
Well, that's true too. If he got better because of medication, then that's one thing. If he just, came out of it somehow, that's something different.
As far as I've got this from different sources that he was on, did get on medication at some point, and that helped smooth over.
Now, you mentioned Louise Lacey. She was part of this movement, right?
Yeah. Do you know Louise?
No, I don't. I just was reading about her, that she was part of that group. And you say she's a friend of yours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I gotta ask, are you a Discordian?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I had a funny feeling about that.
How could I not be, with having had the Discordian archives passed on to me? And my Discordian name is the Wrong Reverend Houdini Kundalini of the Church of Unwavering Indifference.
I like that. Oh, that's funny. And
Louise,
when did you cross over?
when I first got into this stuff, I was interested in Kerry Thornley. Not so much Discordianism,
right?
But just Thornley's crazy life, and that led to the first book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy. That was like 2003. And so I got involved with, interviewing some of these old school Discordianism, and I just grew to appreciate it over time, and eventually I made that bold leap and became a pope in the Discordian Society, which anybody can be a pope in the Discordian Society. All you have to do is say that you are.
Do they have female popes?
Well, of course, Louise is a pope, and her Discordian name is Lady L.F.A.B., and there's a interesting story behind that name. Louise worked, a lot of the Discordians were writers and artists and whatnot, and she...
I read the meaning of that name. It was something that Eldridge Cleaver had said to her.
Yeah.
I guess they were friends.
Yeah, they both worked for Ramparts magazine. In fact, Louise was the research director for the research on the Kennedy assassination. Ramparts was one of the first magazines to really tackle that subject. You know, this was in the mid-'60s, before a lot of the popular press were even willing to entertain theories there was a conspiracy. Anyway, she was working there at Ramparts, and she showed up one day, and Eldridge Cleaver, who also worked at Ramparts during this period, was there in the office with some other guy, and the other guy said to Cleaver, "Hey, here comes that fucking anarchist bitch." And Cleaver said, "Hey, man, she's my friend. She's a good lady. She taught me how to eat artichokes." And so, anyway, that's how the name came, Lady L. F-A-B.
F-A-B. I guess we can bleep that out later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Colorful.
I'm just joking.
I'm not
But
sure.
anyhow, I mean, I'm the one that drew it out of you, so don't worry about it.
Yep.
But so now, so if you are I guess a follower or a proponent of Discordianism, how does that apply in your everyday life? I mean, are there certain principles that are set out for people to live by?
There's no rules at all.
No.
And the famous Discordian saying is, "We Discordians must stick apart."
I was going to say, because in a way, it seems like if there is some sort of philosophy, and especially, you know, with the assigning of names and things like that, maybe there's no hierarchy, but it seemed like it was almost getting on the verge of organizing, and I was thinking, uh-oh, I smell trouble. If, you know, when things start organizing, that's when the trouble begins. Well, and especially if you're an organization or a group based on chaos, I would think an organization would be sort of anti. Yeah, exactly.
Well, see, that's what in the early days, Greg Hill and Kerry Thornley, you know, when they first started it, they were the only ones that could actually, make people popes in the Discordian Society. But like in '69 or so, Greg Hill had the revelation that that's a bunch of BS, you know. Anybody should be able to declare themselves popes anytime they want to, and that's when the Discordian Society kind of changed its focus during that period. You know, as far as an overarching philosophy or doctrines or whatever, there really isn't any. I mean, my take on it is, we do live in a chaotic universe, so why does that necessarily have to be a bad thing, you know? Embrace the chaos, kind of go with the flow, and let it lead you where it may.
Is it all based on chaos, or is it sort of order and disorder?
It's those two.
It seems like sort of almost, you know, again, sort of there's some Gnostic sort of type underpinnings there, with the sort of the dark and the light and the opposites and order and chaos. And you know,
that's very observant. Other people have pointed that out to me, that there's some similarities with Gnosticism, and I'm not that familiar with Gnosticism, and if you look at the symbol of Discordianism, it's called the sacred cow, or, you know, spelled chaos.
K-A-O?
C-H-A-O, the sacred cow, or the sacred
C-H-A-O.
cow. And so that's the symbol of Discordianism, which allegedly was revealed to Thornley and Hill in that bowling alley, and way back when they had a vision, and all the bowlers in the bowling alley froze, and a chimpanzee appeared to them holding the sacred cow. And if you look at that symbol, and you can find it anywhere on the internet, it's like the yin and yang.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Yeah, definitely.
But they call it the Hodge and Podge. On one side, you have the Pentagon.
Yep.
Which basically depicts what they called anarchistic powers of chaos, and on the other side is the golden apple, which relates to the story of Eris and what's that called? The story. Well, there's a whole story behind that, but the golden apple is another form of chaos. So there's the two conflicting forms of chaos. One is the more creative, and the other is the more controlling. And so that's kind of the hodgepodge, those two forces counterbalancing each other.
Interesting. Crazy. But yeah, there is definitely some Gnostic elements in the whole idea of the feminine, too, is sort of a bit of a Gnostic idea.
Yeah, that's interesting you brought that up. Occasionally we'll have guest posts at the website Historia Discordia, which deals with all these Discordian archives, and a fellow by the name of oh shucks, I'm forgetting his name now. Robert. This is what happens when you get older. But anyway, he wrote a whole post devoted to the theme of the similarities between Discordianism and Gnosticism.
Yeah, a few weeks ago we had on Timothy Wiley talking about the process church, and there were some. I noticed some of the same ideas. You know, the opposites, the mirrors, and the
can't have one with the other.
Darkness and the light, yeah. Right? Exactly. So.
I think there's truth.
Now, is there a process church connection to Discordianism? Was there?
If you look deeply enough, everything's connected. There's connections between.
Isn't that the truth?
There's some very tenuous connections that are so obscure to even go into it here would be a 5-minute story that would leave you scratching your head, you know. But
yeah, since we only have 4.5 minutes or 3.5 minutes left, I guess we can't do that one.
Yeah, there are some vague connections. An interesting one with Charles Manson and Carrie Thornley, of all people. Carrie Thornley, you know, during the later years corresponded, was pen pal with different people in prison. And he was corresponding with one fellow who knew Charles Manson. And so somehow Carrie Thornley got on Charles Manson's radar and sent Carrie Thornley a letter, you know, so they corresponded a little bit. And actually, Charles Manson sent Carrie Thornley a Christmas card, of all things, on a postcard, and it's reproduced in the book Historia Discordia, and Thornley later used this postcard as like a raffle to raise money to help a young lady who was raped and kidnapped and taken to California. So he was trying to get her back in Atlanta during this period, and I think she was locked up in a psych ward somewhere in California. So anyway, Thornley was able to raffle off that Charles Manson postcard and get his friend, this young lady, out of a psychiatric facility in California, reunited with her parents there in Atlanta.
Oh my gosh. How much did he get for it?
I have no idea. I know the guy.
Must have been a pretty penny.
No, it was just, you know, he advertised it there in little 5 points, maybe for a couple weeks, you know, and maybe, you know, $1 a pop, and got a few $100s, and, you know, enough money to get his friend back to Atlanta.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the plane tickets probably weren't that much then either. You know, before we go, which is going to be just any second, I wanted to let people know how they can get your books. You can go to adamgorightly.com or historiadiscordia.com for his latest book. But you can see all of his books on his website, and there's some really interesting stuff. There's so many things I wanted to get into, but we didn't have time. Catcher in the Rye, to say the least. I gotta talk to you about Catcher in the Rye one of these times.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyhow, hopefully you'll come back on and
Certainly.
see us, and we can talk about so many other things that you've written about. Thank you so much, Adam Gorightly, for being our guest tonight, and hope to talk to you again very, very soon.
Thanks for having me on, Renee. It was fun.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Esa es